The classical Arabic heritage. Stages of Arabic poetry. Pre-Islamic, early Islamic, Abbasid, Mamluks, Ottomans, modern period. Pre-Islamic poetry. Social presence of an audience type. Epic qualities, meter and rhyme. Verses is divided into two halves of equal metrical value. Odes and Qasida, Golden Ode. Malakat, elegies, imagery, preamble, description of journey to the desert, and praise. Topic: self-praise, panegyric, satire, elegy, description, imagery. Islamic poetry: ode with monorhyme, monometer, imagery, prelude, desert imagery, panegyric. Abbasid poets: Abu Nuwas, Abu Tamam, Al-Mutanabbi, Abul al-Mari. Neoclassical Arabic poetry. The emergence of neoclassical poetry in modern Arabic literature in the 19th century was not the outcome of the sudden incursion of a new literary model upon an established system of literature. The main trend was to go back to the old model and to relive the glorious experience of ancient poets. The model was that of medieval Arabic poetry at its peak. The pre-Islamic and early Islamic periods, especially to the Abbasids such as Mutanabbi, Al-Botri, and Abu Tamam. Modern neoclassical poetry does not constitute a phase or a stage for the Arab poets. Writing in traditional fashion never ceased, even in the darkest of times. Between the 14th and 19th century, poetry was produced in Fusha and according to the traditional meters. Uninspired literary quality was composed by imitative versifiers who rarely employed it as a means of expressing human experience. The public for whom these poems were composed was a selected group of ulema and privileged literati who saw the poets as entertainers and boon companions. The poet was a reciter of his own poetry. Poetry is the only form that was not influenced by the imported literary model. Instead, there was a return to the sources to produce verses which were reminiscent in their masculinity and lucidity. The primary distinctive features of neoclassical poetry. The poems of the neoclassical poets are composed in the traditional meters of classical Arabic poetry. Neoclassical poets continue to use the classical agad. Most of the divans are arranged accordingly. These thematic types often impose a predetermined structure and sometimes affect the choice of meters. The poems are frequently impersonal and the poet's experience is hidden beneath layers of convention. Sections often appear to be genre bound rather than spontaneous. The neoclassical language is essentially dependent on that of medieval Arabic poetry, especially that of the Abbasid period. Not only the lexical inventory but the choice of figurative language which is derived in this way, invoking classical place, names, images, and personages is a major feature of most representative neoclassical poets. Mahmud Sami Al-Barudi, 1839 to 1904. Barudi is a true precursor of the modern poetic revival. His work is a return to the classicism of early medieval Arabic poetry, especially the poetry of the Abbasid period. He combined a return to the purity of diction, forceful expression, and the classicism of the Abbasids with the ability to express his own experience. The renaissance of modern Arabic poetry truly begins with him. Barudi is considered the master of this word and the pen because he was distinguished both as a soldier and as a poet. Ismail appointed him governor of the Sharqiya province under Tawfiq. He was the minister of education and Waqf. Due to his involvement with the Urabi rebellion, he was tried and exiled to Ceylon for a period of 17 years. Both his wife and daughter died while he was away, and when he came back to Egypt in 1900, he was in poor condition just 4 years before his death. Baudi used main events from his life as material for his poems. They were filled with descriptions of the battles in which he fought, as well as the landscape in the countries he visited during his travels. They also deal with the extreme changes in his fortune, from the greatness of power to the humiliation of defeat. While in exile, his poems reflect the homesickness and longing for scenes and places he remembered in Egypt. Barudi's work appeared in 1915, long after his death. Before he died, he had written a preface to his works, which is an extremely important document. It shed light on his poetry and helped to explain why he occupied a crucial position in the development of modern Arabic poetry. Barudi satisfied a real need in man. He felt that the love of poetry was imprinted in the hearts of men. His view was that the one who has the gift of writing good poetry and who is virtuous and pure of soul would have control over the hearts of men. So according to him, morality is an essential ingredient. He saw the goal of poetry to educate the soul, train the understanding, and awaken the mind to noble virtue. Beyond the morality is the basis that poetry is an art that has to be learned and mastered. He knew of the difficulty which faced him since at one point he decided to give up writing verse. He could not, however, as he said, he would go against his own nature. In the preface of his works are three famous lines: poetry is difficult and its uphill path is long. Whoever tries to ascend it, not being familiar with it, will stumble and fall into the abyss.